Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of being. It's your boy, Cy Kempen. And if all those Dark Tower references went right over your head, have no fear. You're in the flip zone with a Stephen King retro review of the book that took me nearly a month to finish, and that's It. I finished this last night after it took me, I would say, probably a solid month, maybe a little bit longer to get through this book. I'm not going to be able to hold this sucker up the entire time I talk. It's just too big and heavy. I know that's what she said. But man, what can I say about this book? It was pretty freaking unbelievable. And I can't talk obviously about every single aspect of this thing because, this is the second longest book I've read in my life, and the first longest book is his uncut version of The Stand, which I think is like 20 or 25 pages longer than this one. But man, and between this book, don't forget this book is 33 years old. It's been adapted twice now for the screen. So if any of y'all are worried about spoilers at this point, I mean, it's not like I'm going to be talking about anything that specific, but I don't know what to tell you. This book is rated pretty highly among King fans. It's usually on the short list of his very best books. And rightfully so. I would probably add my voice to that choir because and this thought hit me as I was reading like the last maybe 10 or 20 pages last night. They were talking about the director of the new movie, It Chapter 2, was talking about doing a supercut. And I watched one of Fuego's videos on the Horror Show channel, which Beth recommended to me from B-Side Records, and I've become obsessed with Fuego and his Stephen King, Hail to Stephen King channel on that Horror Show channel, his like sub channel. And so again, thank you for recommending that to me, Beth. But I hear all this talk of there being like a supercut of the It movie, with chapters 1 and 2, plus an extra, I don't know, hour of deleted scenes or 2 hours or something like that. And it's going to be like this, it wants to make like this big, long, I don't know, 6 or 7 hour long movie. But as I was finishing this, it hit me. This is the supercut. Not what's been filmed. This is the supercut of it right here. So if you want that, read this book. Because there's so much in here that never made it to the screen. And there's so many little scenes, so many little like just thoughts that run through the characters' heads that give you just that little bit more in depth into their character, that this is the supercut. Not anything you can watch on the screen. Of course, not that I would necessarily turn down a supercut of the It movie because I really enjoyed it. I like this new It much, much better than the original Tim Curry version in 1990. I look at Tim Curry as Pennywise, and it makes me laugh more than creeps me out. And seeing Bill Skarsgård, even just in interviews that I've watched, while he's promoting the movie, and he's just himself. He's not in the Pennywise makeup, and he'll do the smile, and even that just creeps me out. So, I know I've said it before, but I think his Pennywise is vastly superior to the original Tim Curry adaptation. But really, both of those pale in comparison to this. I mean, there's certain books, and it's not just by King. This is with, any author that you can think of that you really like. There's certain books where that they're just on, they're onto something, and they've got a grasp of what they're trying to tell and say, and they just nail it. that's what King does with this book. Yeah, I don't know if I would rank this as my number one favorite King book, but I would at least put this in the top 5, maybe top 3. The length of it is the only thing that holds me back. Because like I said, the first time I read this, I couldn't do it because it was just too long, and it was kind of intimidating, picking up a book this size. And even when I started this again, I read like the first 100 pages, and then I got that Salem's Lot first edition, and then I was hot to read that, so I set this aside, read it, and then not read that book, and then I came back to this one, and I'm like, man, I don't know, because I knew it was going to be a big time commitment, and I just knew that King doesn't end all of his books all that well. I mean, but I can honestly say that I enjoyed the ending of this book. I don't know if everybody does, but I enjoyed the ending of this book, and it made me glad because, I made it through to the end, and it was like an accomplishment. But at the same time, it felt kind of melancholy because, I've lived with the losers, like I said, for almost a month straight. I read in this book almost every day for a straight month. I'm thinking maybe a little bit longer. And when it was finally over, I got to say it, I felt a little sad because, King develops these characters so well. And the reason this book is so long is because he details each kid's life, each kid's encounter with it in great detail, both as when they're kids and again when they're as adults. And then at the end, he kind of like time jumps back and forth between the kids from 1958 in the book. In the movie, it's like 1989, but in the book, it's 1958. And then with them as adults in 85. How they fought it, what happened, and it jumps back and forth, and then you've got Henry Bowers kind of, chasing after them, but never quite catching them in the sewers. And of course, Henry and his friends don't come to a very nice end, which is there were parts in this book that really made you cheer for Pennywise. I have to tell you, especially, and I'm just going to talk about one specific scene, and it comes about 3/4 of the way through the book. I'm already into like the 800s here, and you learn about the death of Patrick Hockstetter, who is one of the gang of kids that Henry Bowers is the leader of, and those are the bullies that always torture the losers. And it was one of the scenes in the book that probably gave me the chills more than anything else. And I'll just speak to it briefly because Patrick Hockstetter was a sociopath. And King goes into this fairly brief passage talking about what Patrick Hockstetter did to animals. He was torturing and killing animals, which turns my stomach more than any monster. And it was actually kind of hard to read that part because I cannot stand animal cruelty at all. But he gets his comeuppance in kind of a Tales from the Crypt creep show kind of way. And what was interesting to me is that, I'm not going to tell you what happens to Patrick, but I mean, you can figure it out. Pennywise gets him. But you know how the thing with Pennywise is that he's able to take the form of whatever it is you're most afraid of. Well, Patrick, being a sociopath, wasn't really afraid of anything. He thought that like he was the only like real person in the world and everything else is just like a dream fake. And when Pennywise finally gets this kid, King does a few paragraphs where he just says, his face, like Pennywise's face, was just running like wax. It was just like trying to morph because it couldn't figure out what Patrick was afraid of. And he was trying to turn into that thing, and he said, this face was changing and melting, and it was probably one of the creepier scenes in the book. And then finally, Pennywise just says, fuck it, and he just grabs the kid and drags him off through the barrens to the sewers. But by that point, I was kind of cheering him on because I honestly hated Patrick, and I was glad to see him get his comeuppance. But, it's stuff like that. You get so far into this book that when you see characters, get hurt or die or whatever, it really affects you a lot more. So I think this is probably King's most fully realized world. And you learn a lot about Derry, the town, in this book. You learn a lot of its history. There's even a slight crossover with other King books. I can't remember if it was in chapter 1. It's been a while since I've seen it, but Dick Halloran from The Shining makes a cameo appearance in here. When they talk about Derry, like in the 30s, 1930s, and it was pretty neat to see him again. But yeah, King has done several novels and stories centered around Castle Rock, which you could probably make an argument that maybe that might be a more fully realized town than Derry. But boy, I feel like everything I was able to visualize in my head from what King was saying, I just had this perfect view of the town. And a lot of the times King would give like street names like Witcham Street and the corner of Witcham Street and Jackson. And it's like I could picture it in my head enough. I'm like, oh yeah, I know where that is, even though it's fiction, So it's like, okay, I kind of know where that's at, and it's going up here, and then the Kunduskiag River is like a character just like the town of Derry. He talks about that river endlessly in this book, and when you get to the ending, you'll know why. But the place of Derry, the town itself, the landmarks, the street names, the buildings. He just goes so far into creating this world that you can't help but have a good familiarity with the town by the time you're done. So yeah, if like I said, I know it's a big time commitment for me. This was a huge book for someone like me who's a slower reader to undertake. But if you're new to King, like I know Mike, guitar player 07, I know I sent him some King paperbacks. If you really want to know what Stephen King, like quintessential King is, read this book. I know it's long, but it doesn't really drag. There's a lot of detail though. And if you don't like that type of storytelling, then you might find this book a little slow in places. But with the way King slowly builds the tension and creates so many creepy scenes, he throws the kitchen sink in terms of monsters into this book, and it's just pretty freaking amazing if you ask me. So yeah, I would rate this easily in my top 5 all-time of King books out of the 61 that he's written so far. Yeah, and maybe even a little bit higher than that. So that's how good this is to me. And I know this is a much beloved King book among the fan community too. So if you saw the movie and you're kind of curious and you're like, man, I wonder how different could the book possibly be? Believe me, the book is way better, and the descriptions, the character development, not so much the plot. I mean, you kind of know what the plot is early on, and it just kind of sits there. But with King, it's all about character. It's all about situation, and it's all about what is this person going to do when faced with the thing they're most afraid of? How are they going to react? And really, at the core of this book is the friendship between the losers. There's a lot of touching scenes, especially how, the kids meet, how they finally form their group. You get plenty of their adventures in the Barrens, which is like this giant empty like field right in the middle of Derry. It's like a wasteland jungle paradise for kids to play in. And it's very touching. And it was sad at the end when we talk about them being adults as they leave Derry. Mike Hanlon, who's one of the losers, we get to see things mostly from his perspective as the book ends, and he admits to starting to forget about them, after everything that happened in Derry, as they finally break up again and go back to their own lives, in different parts of the country. And they just forget. And it was the same way, when they first faced it as kids and went on with their lives and grew up and moved away, and they just forgot. But the friendship there, I don't think would ever go away among them, because when you're a kid and you make friends like that you end up keeping the friendship as adults. I mean, it's true, you do forget a lot, but when you're together, it's like no time has passed at all. And I'm sure that's how it would be with with the losers had they gotten together again after the events in this book. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about this. Very well worth the time commitment, very well worth the effort to take to read this thing. And yeah, if you really want to know what Stephen King is all about, if you want to see him at, arguably his best, I would say read this book. Fantastic. I'm glad I did it. And I'm ready to move on to something a little bit shorter now, which will be his new book, The Institute. That will be the next thing I read. I just got that book last week, as I showed in a previous video. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many things I could talk about this book. This video would go on for hours, but just in a very general way, I would say that if you really want to see King at his best, read this book. It's easily one of his top 5, I'd say, best books that he's ever written. And the movies that just came out, especially at Chapter 2, yeah, they're faithful to the book in some parts, but really, there's so many things in this book that I don't think you could film, especially like the final confrontation with it, in the sewers when they're adults. I mean, the way they did it in the movie is, it's different, but the way it goes in the book, I thought was much better. And I couldn't imagine how you would film that. So, yeah, in that regard, I think the book trumps the movies easily. And the book is the supercut of the movie. So, highly recommended, not just among King books, but among, books in general. I'd say it is a classic story, quality storytelling, a good ending from King, a sad ending. It made me feel kind of melancholy because, it was over, and I'm not gonna see these characters again, really. But I know there's a few cameos here and there, in other books, but we're never really going to see these characters again, and that just made me a little sad. So there you have it. Yeah, my next book will be The Institute. I will start on that probably tomorrow. I'm gonna take a day. I'm gonna take a day off from King here, kind of recharge myself a little bit, and then we'll start that book this week. I'm waiting on one more hardcover to arrive in the mail, and then I can do a short video showcasing all of the King hardcovers that I've got, because I think I'll have them all by then. Plus, I have to hit my storage unit up. There's a King related thing that I need to show, that I need to pull actually, that might be interesting to Dark Tower fans, because it's something that's, in 2019, it's probably not that easily attainable, and it's probably not, at least not cheaply. And I've got them, so I'm going to try to get to my storage unit this week and pull those items out to show you when I do my collection video, which hopefully should be this week. I'm just waiting for the last book to arrive, and it's Christine. Christine is the last hardcover that I'm waiting for, and I thought I almost got ripped off again, because I bought the book on the 1st, and after 10 days, nothing. I sent the guy a message through eBay saying basically, what the fuck? Where's my book? And he didn't answer till like a week later. It was like on Saturday night. He finally responds. He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I sent this. I'll get it out right away." And it's still in Reno, Nevada. Meteorate, I'm hoping it gets here by the end of the week. We'll see. But the problem is, I thought, I was going to start going through eBay for a refund, and ended up buying a second copy. So I'm going to actually have 2 copies of Christine on the way. So there could be some more SKLT for somebody in the near future, because I want to complete the collection. So I didn't want to wait on a slow seller. So there you go. But that's a story for another time. Thank you all for watching. If you made it to the end, thank you. And read it. It's a great book. Okay, guys. Peace. And I will see you again soon. So take care.